My name is Jonathan Ricci, and you are listening to the F1 podcast. What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here from the F1 podcast. Today is August 3rd, 2023, and we're recording this a couple of days after the Belgium Grand Prix. I'm here with my co-host, Andrew. Andrew, happy baby Friday. How are you doing?
Good. Happy Friday Eve to you too.
It's I don't know if you know, it's pretty hot outside. I think it's 29 degrees for August. So
Yeah, I'm playing in a slow pitch tournament. The NSA's Canadian side of the World Series is in Hamilton this weekend, so should be good weather. It's going to be really hot, and hopefully the rain passes off.
that's awesome, Andrew. Wishing you best this weekend. First one, we're sitting at 538 followers on Instagram. So we are inching our way to 600 by the end of the month. So we're hopefully we can hit that, and by 1,000 by the end of 2023. Second announcement, on April 12th, myself and Erica and a couple of fans are going to be at Wasaga Beach, and we have something fun planned. We're going to go to Wasaga 500 on the Saturday, and we're going to do go-karting. Who is the best go-kart driver? And I don't know, man. Spencer's apparently getting a trophy. It's all gonna be on social media. We're really excited. So if you're in Wasaga Beach, not this weekend, but next Saturday, please keep posted on our social media channels. Love to see you on the 12th.
Unfortunately, I'm at a friend's cottage that weekend in Aurelia, so I can't make it to Wasaga, but I look forward to seeing the content that y'all make from that, because it's gonna be hilarious watching you guys turn it up like Max Verstappen does.
Do a barrel roll.
I don't know. Spencer said he's going to pull a Leclerc at Monaco, probably.
You lose.
But nevertheless, we'll obviously update everybody, and please check our Instagram page, an official announcement there. Belgian Grand Prix happened this weekend. Really exciting sprint, really exciting race. But before we kind of get into it, I know you wanted to do the fastest lap this week, and shockingly was not set by Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton set the fastest lap at 1 minute and 47 seconds. So, Andrew, I guess you want to get right into it. Let me grab the timer. All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Really interesting weekend at the Belgian Grand Prix, as it was really wet on Friday for practice, which then led into the qualification for the main race, where we saw Max take another pole between where Charles finished behind him, and then Sergio Perez finishing P3. Resurgence again from McLaren, it's finishing P6 and P7 in the qualification, but then Max received a 5-place grid penalty for a gearbox change, which saw Leclerc be at the top of, or be at pole for this race. Then on Saturday, it still was wet for the sprint qualifying shootout, where we saw Max Verstappen again take the sprint qualification in terms of the race win, but followed by 2 new entrants on the podium this year. We had Oscar Piastri finishing P2 and Gasly finishing P3, which was really exciting to see. During the race, there was an incident where Lewis Hamilton knocked the side off of Checo's car pretty much, and created a 5-second penalty for himself, which then he had to serve after the race, where he finished 4th, but due to the 5-second penalty, finished 7th. On to the race, where nobody knew what to grant. No one knew what to run in terms of setup, because they all got screwed with the weather on Friday and Saturday. So it created a absolute mayhem of racing on Sunday, which was great to see. Turn 1 incident, though, however, Oscar Piastri got knocked out of the race by Carlos Sainz, or if you ask Carlos Sainz, Oscar was a little too ambitious. We'll talk about that later. But again, Max Verstappen wins from 6 on the grid, a new position where he's won. Leclerc does not convert pole position to a win, for I think for like the 9th time in a row. Checo finishes P2, Charles finishes P3, and we can't wait to talk about more of the racing incident that happened between Sainz and Piastri.
Okay, 1:49. That's pretty good.
All right.
But yeah, I think it was a really interesting weekend. And just to keep in mind for a lot of our listeners, this was the last race heading into the summer break. So Formula One is going to be on break until I think it's August 25th, August 27th. That's the next weekend. But I think, I don't know if you've realized this, Andrew, before we kind of talk a little bit about the race, ESPN, put out a tweet leading up to the race. Sunday's race had 1.17 million viewers, up 11% from last year's, which was 1.05 million. Also at the summer break, F1 is averaging 1.24 million viewers on US TV, down slightly from the point last year, but up slightly from the full 2020 full season average. Like, yes, it has been the Max Verstappen Red Bull show this year, but so people are turning out and people are watching like magic happen on the track. And I know you have some feelings about this.
All the people going, F1's not watchable. He wins every race. I can't watch it. Shut the front door, man. Like, enjoy greatness while you are witnessing it. We are witnessing something that I don't even think is going to be repeatable unless it's by the same guy, because this guy hasn't lost a race since April 30th, John, since Baku, where his teammate won. And since then, he's won 8 GPs, 2 sprint races, and he's dominated the entire field, right? So as a fan, yeah, it sucks if you just casually watch, see the same guy over and over again, go get P1. But it's not unwatchable. Like, give yourself a shake here, why don't you? There are some plenty great battles in the midfield with McLaren coming back up. There's now 4 teams fighting for that P2 spot in the championship now. And then also, why don't you continue to watch? Maybe Max could pull off the final domination the entire year, win out, set some crazy records, and just be a witness to an amazing season for a team that had a lot of struggles when Mercedes were dominating. I know a lot of people are complaining then. So now that Red Bull's winning, is there a lot of complaints still? So everyone, take these next 4 weeks, do your thing, deep breath, and come to Zandvoort with a new mindset on the final part of the year.
To watch Max Verstappen win again.
Exactly. But I mean it in terms of enjoy the midfield battles, watch those more often or take more attention to those, as well as maybe if Max wins out, be appreciative how much he's kicking everyone's ass in the field.
I think, yeah, let's talk about the midfield battle, because I think we had 2 new people on the podium this year. Do we really call it a podium on a sprint race?
Why not? You get points for it, so sure.
Oscar Piastri was struggled with that. He's like, I don't know if I call this a podium.
Sorry. Okay, yeah, this is technically, it's not a podium in theory, but it is great to see him get into that podium position for the sprint race.
Yeah, so let's get right into the sprint, because not only did you have Max win the sprint, but also you had Oscar Piastri, his first kind of trophy or whatever you want to call this, first of his racing career. And, we talked about how Alpine has been having a very bad year. Pierre Gasly on the podium. And especially this probably felt good for Otmar Satmar, seeing some, at least as he leaves the paddock, that like at least they got some sort of consolation prize.
Yeah, like talk about a turnaround weekend for them, eh? On Friday, we posted a real estate. Otmar Safnauer, Alan Permain, who is their sporting director, and chief technical officer Pat Fry were leaving the team after this race. So gonna see a whole new team in the paddock there, I guess, come Zandvoort. But with that said, really bad news to start the weekend, and they were able to turn that into somewhat of a positive. Pierre Gasly finishing on the podium for Alpine. Esteban just outside of the points for the sprint. But great to see. It's like those small victories that they needed after kind of that news on Friday.
Yeah, and not only just that news on Friday, we've kind of talked about it, is that a number of these middle field teams, it's Formula One, it's a marathon, not just a sprint. And we're starting to see some of these kind of teams that like were struggling at the front or doing very well at the front, and then now starting to struggle here. And so it's really good to see Alpine, get some momentum like this weekend, and like kind of head into, the summer break with like some sort of consolation prize.
So interesting start to the sprint, though, would you say? Kind of started, every car had to start on full wets. They delayed the start. And they did a rolling start or they did 4 formation laps behind the safety car. And then when they started going up again, they had a few like Piastri, Sainz, Gasly, Hamilton, Checo, Danny Rick, Albon, I think Stroll, like a lot of people start switching to intermediates. Yeah. Max did not. Then again, he's so fast in that car that didn't really need to. He's able to go on track, figure out if he really needed wets after that first go around. Figured no, it was not the case. But by the time he made that his quick way around the track and then was able to pit, he still got to come out in front or near the front and take over at that point.
And I'm just trying to think, was it Ocon or was it Fernando Alonso who tried to put on mediums and then immediately went into the gate?
Or yeah, so that happened. Yeah, so Aston Martin, weekend to forget on Saturday, because we had Stroll and SQ2 put on mediums to try and like take a gamble and getting into Q3. He lost it in, I believe.
Oh, it was Lance Stroll. Yeah,
it was somewhere down in sector 2, maybe in Pouan area, where he couldn't stop and he just went right into the wall. Created red flag and he didn't make it out, but good recovery drive for him on Sunday. We'll get into the race there. But yeah, Fernando Alonso crashed out in the sprint too. So having both cars crash out of 2 different sessions in Saturday was really challenging to see as an Aston Martin fan.
Yeah, and I thought we saw some great racing. Regardless, I think particularly, the Ferraris could be proud that at least just get some points in the sprint, because we know that Leclerc can deliver the car on a Saturday when it comes to qualifying, but when it comes to the race, it's like a totally different story because you have to compete against the 2 Red Bulls. But I'm happy with a 4-5 at least, But yeah, we saw Lando and Oscar. Man, that car has definitely changed some of these conversations that we're having in these constructor battles. It's crazy to think what they started off with and what they're kind of going into the summer. At like some point, probably they don't want to go on summer break. They're like, no, let's keep racing. Let's not put this car away for a month.
And their low downforce setup this weekend really paid dividends on Saturday because of the sprint and how wet it was. Able to get more grip on the track, which then saw Piastri finish P2, and then having Lando finishing P6 in the sprint was great. But we had our first kind of controversial moment of the weekend, Richie, during the race, where Lewis Hamilton and Checo Perez were battling, I believe, through to turn 17, where they're fighting for P4 and they banged wheels. Unfortunately, Lewis left a little bit of a hole in the side pod. And at that point, Perez was then overtaken by kind of everybody. And he ran into the gravel trap on the next turn and then eventually retired, which then led to a 5-second penalty given to Hamilton. Now, would you deem that kind of they're banging wheels and unfortunately, unfortunate incident where, Lewis's wheel went into the side of Checo's car. Do you qualify that as a 5-second penalty? In my opinion, it was on the line, but the way that Checo then went into the pits to then retire, kind of like, how in hockey when guys get hit from behind or there's like a controversial hit that may lead to a 5-minute penalty, and then there's an injury that the guy is injured, and it's kind of like it not enforces but influences the call to be that major penalty. Kind of similar situation, I think, here.
I don't know, like, we've talked about like inconsistencies when it's come to penalties. So I actually kind of was shocked that like they gave the 5 seconds, and like part of me was just like, great, because the Ferraris were kind of struggling at one point in the sprint, and so that like having that 5-second gap was able to get both of them to jump over, and I think Lando Norris benefited too. But I think the real question is in terms of penalties is why wasn't, if we can jump right into the race, do you think so let's get into the race now. Max wins, Checo rebounds second, Leclerc, who started first and again starts on pole, doesn't win the race, but he still retains a podium. But the question was, both Oscar and Sainz collided with each other on the first lap, and as you kind of said in your fastest lap, was Oscar a little too greedy or a little too like gonna nosedive right into the turn, or like not Leclerc, but Carlos did not give him any space? I don't know. It's kind of one of those 50-50 things, and like crashes are going to happen on the first lap. So I think that's probably just maybe was that the rationale, just, whatever, like this has happened. So
I think it was a little ambitious by Oscar to go down the inside of turn 1 at La Source there, but having it be 3 wide. However, I do think there was enough space. It looked like it just Sainz turned right in on him after he locked up to try and make the corner. At that point, I think combination of Oscar's ambitiousness versus and Sainz's kind of overcorrection into the corner created a racing incident where eventually both were knocked out of the race. So, a 50-50 decision that kind of leads to them both being knocked out of the race. I think it's a racing incident at that point because they were both at fault in that case. So to me, I think that was a good call. But again, the consistency, right? You had a 5-second penalty for wheel banging, similar idea. I guess that was open air track, right? You weren't going into a corner for that. And then they kind of see Lewis could have maybe left a little bit more space, hence why the 5-second penalty, where in the turn there was no space.
I actually, speaking about space, I totally forgot to talk about this on the sprint. But when pretty much everybody went in to go change their tires, I was utterly shocked there was no collisions. We had so many of those cars coming at the same time, and especially like when it's at, I don't know, Andrew, like we've seen a lot of issues in the pit lane when it comes to like traffic or unsafe releases. I also thought this was really interesting on the radio. Max's and his engineers, they sounded like an old couple just bickering the whole time.
It's true because it was funny, right? Because they were talking about, Max wanted to know what Checo was doing and if they're racing, and GP was just not having anybody. He was just listen to me, trust me. And Max would go on a set of softs, and I guess he wore out the tire pretty good on the first lap, and GP was like, "What the hell are you doing?" Right? So they're kind of bickering back and forth. But I think the funniest comment from Max over the entire weekend was towards the end of the race when, starting in P6 behind his teammate in P2, he surpasses his Perez on the track and then proceeds to gain like a 25 second advantage against him. And he comes on the radio and he goes, "So do you think it'd be a good time now to do some extra pit stop practice? Get a new set of tires, get a little pit stop training in before the end of the summer season or before the summer break?" And GP was like, "No, not this time." Because the absolute confidence in that discussion was hilarious.
Do a barrel roll.
It was really interesting, but the fact that how Max is able to gain that much time is interesting. Another car that looked really good, but I don't think got into the points this weekend was that Williams, man. I think it was that Alex Albon had the fastest, not so much the fastest car, but something about fastest on the straights or something like that.
They had the top speed on their dry setup. So crazy enough, Saturday was the case of how did you set your car up before Parc Fermé, right?
Yeah.
A lot of teams in the up near the top did a lot of low downforce, right? Which then they compromises top end speed, where a lot of the bottom teams in the constructors decided to go for a higher, like not as much downforce, which then led to having greater top speeds. Doesn't work all the time, but I think the top speed for Williams this week was like 356 kph. While McLaren, I think that was with the DRS Open. And with the DRS Open, I think McLaren's was like 330, which didn't top like Williams's toe speed at all. So it was a really interesting weekend in terms of how cars are set up. And the Williams was an absolute rocket ship down the Kemmel Straight. And you could see that with Albon just easily passing Lando during the first part of that race.
Yeah, I know. It was really interesting to kind of just see the developments with that Williams car and just seeing the confidence that like Alex Albon is able to bring with it. And like we could see some more points of him pulling that out. Just why I forgot to mention, I think you mentioned Ferrari a little bit earlier, but I think overall, good weekend. We get a podium. We'll just take the trophies where we can.
Yeah, and it's another non-converted pole for Charles Leclerc. But when the guy starting in P6 wins the race by 20 some odd seconds over his own teammate, there's really not much you can do. Like the Red Bull have a rocket ship. They're fast in every component necessary. They were at one of the teams that had one of the lower downforces this weekend where they compromised a little bit of speed, but their speed through the corners, especially like in sector 2, is just where they made their money this weekend, especially Max. And he was so smooth in that car. If you're a Ferrari fan, you take those points, man. You definitely take those points. Especially with Sainz getting knocked out of the race early on. You need that podium spot to gain on a team like such as Aston Martin. You got more points than that in that regards.
5 points.
Hey,
Five points.
But you take it while you can, right? Going into the summer break. So that was an interesting, definitely good for Ferrari. I don't mean to sound goo goo gaga, but I just cannot get over how dominant Max was in this race. Like the fact that you started at P6 and was able to overtake your teammate within the first 25% of the race and then beat him in this quote unquote same car by like a 20 some odd second advantage, like a full pit stop, is mind blowing.
It was interesting that you mentioned that because they were interviewing Helmut Marko. And one of the questions is like, he got asked by the reporter. He's like, oh, well, like, yes, you're happy that Max won, but like Checo's P2, but he's like 22 seconds behind Max. And Helmut Marko's like, yeah, but we're happy with that. Like everyone knows that Max is great and he's just unbelievable. But yeah, it's just the same car, 22 seconds behind. We have a lot to talk about in our midterm episode. Because I think what we want to plan to do is do what we've done in previous seasons is we'll rank the drivers where they stand and our thoughts of this. But yeah, no, I think there will be a lot of questions of like, how has Checo not been able to compete as well in the same car as Max? Let's talk a little bit about Mercedes this weekend. Very different setups, very different strategies. I think. I don't know, Andrew, what did you kind of see what was going on the Silver Arrows this weekend?
Yeah, it was funny. I was watching like their post-race debrief on YouTube and they were talking about why there was two different setups on their cars, right? In terms of wings, in terms of downforce. Played well for Lewis this weekend over Russell. But it was because they had no chance to determine they had no chance to get any data on these new dry Pirelli tires. So it was kind of like you just guessed and how you felt in the car was what the setup. Traditionally they'll talk in between the weekend to say, okay, this is what I felt on my car, is that you get more speed and so on and so forth, right, in terms of the setup. But they weren't able to determine that because they had no practice running in the dry. And once the car's in parc ferme, you can't change the setup without incurring grid penalty spots, right? So it seemed out that Hamilton was able to pick the right setup this weekend and finish ahead of his teammate George Russell, who and Hamilton was able to secure the fastest lap as well. So I think a decent weekend for Mercedes. Interesting to see how they play the rest of the season in terms of development. Do they bring some track specific development to upgrades to the cars so that they can gain more knowledge of it heading into 2023? Because I can imagine some 2024, because I can imagine some Mercedes fans are getting very restless not seeing the Silver Arrow at the top.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I don't think we really have any in our close friends that are really Mercedes fans. But, I'm curious to hear, like, what is their rationale on how the season's going for them? But yeah, no, that's fair. It's like, do you now put all your eggs in one basket for this season, or you kind of start to look at the next season? So, and it's like, is Toto Wolff ever going to be on the hot seat, or is he just still well liked within
the guy's won like 8 consecutive constructors championships. That guy can probably do whatever he wants for a little bit. Well, Ocon did finish P8 in the race, so they got some good points for Alpine there. So it was good, again, recovery weekend for them.
Yuki got a point.
Yeah, you know what? Yuki to me was one of the best drivers this weekend. He was so fast on that AlphaTauri, faster than his teammate Danny Rick by quite a margin, and he was so competitive down the straights and really had some really great battles where he came out on top on a few of those, especially in the midfield there. So it was fun to watch that midfield kind of all shape up this weekend at the race. But yeah, Yuki was sensational.
I think let's just jump quickly to his partner, Daniel Ricciardo. I think he didn't really have the greatest of weekends. He did look promising last week with a P13 finish. He dropped a P16 this weekend, but I think especially with a track like Belgium, a car like his is not going to compete per se. But I mean, I don't know where that extra energy came from Yuki, but he was able to like squeeze out a point for the team.
And it's good because he's getting pushed now, right? Having a guy like Danny Rick, who is so well loved on and off the track by his peers and by his fans, right? So It's a challenge for Yuki. He needs it in terms of not from a popular standpoint, but knowing how popular Daniel is and how like well kept he is in the paddock and how much he wants to keep his seat in that regards. Yuki's got to showcase why he wants it more, and he did that this weekend.
I was just curious, is there anything else that kind of like stood out to you this weekend? I think it definitely for him, it gives him some motivation to go into the summer, especially how competitive. And I was going to ask, like, I wonder if we're going to get some driver rumors or announcements going into the summer.
What stood out for me, or who stood out for me this weekend, was actually Lando Norris on Sunday. Guy started in P17 with the medium tire and kind of the low downforce setup. So he got stuck in a lot of traffic early on in the race, really tried to fight the cars around him, but just because of the setup, they were getting overtaken by everybody because their top speed was not hitting the level of their competition around them. So he just kept falling back, fell back to P16. He tried to put on a set of hards, like to kind of get back into like some traffic, or to get out of traffic and to get some clean air and have, get some time made up there. But he ended up being back in traffic. So it was just compounding the frustration at that point. And what really saved his race was that rain on lap 20. It was kind of like a point where it was a brief shower where you put on like a slick tire to make some time up, so to speak, in terms of grip levels, because everyone's going to be, especially in the midfield, right? And up at the front, they want to see if it's going to rain a little bit more to determine whether or not they need to put inters on. So the gamble then comes in. Do you stop early, put on a fret of softs, kind of get yourself out of traffic and be able to make some time up, which he ended up doing. And from that, he was able to, put on a better tire and start competing with the speed around, in the midfield, was able to get it back up to P7, and he was able to manage his tires to stay at P7. So a bit of a roller coaster ride for Lando in that sense, with some maybe a tough strategy call early, but a really great gamble really paid off for him to get some points.
Yeah, and I think it was definitely like a great weekend. I think we did see a lot of like fun racing today. This past weekend. I think we'll just tie into some news. There's not much that has come out this weekend, but I don't know if you've really seen this one. I don't know if you've seen this one rumor that's been going on, but apparently AlphaTauri's new name is expected to be Hugo Boss Bulls Racing when they get their sponsorship. The decision will be made in September. I don't know how accurate this is, but that seems like the biggest buzzword in the world.
The name could be better. Hugo Boss's Bulls Racing just does not flow.
My name is Daniel Ricardo, and I race for Hugo Boss Bulls Racing.
Yeah, no,
right off the tongue.
That's a no from me.
Okay, well, this week was a little bit of a shorter episode. Thank you everyone who tuned in for this week's episode. Are going to be doing some stuff in the summer, and we're really excited. We'll be at Wasaga. We really encourage our fans to put some questions in the chat. Really would love to kind of hear your opinions. And Andrew, I think any last parting words kind of going into the summer break. I think a lot of people are probably excited we can put Formula One down for a bit, keyword a bit, but we got some excitement going on.
As I said earlier, those who are having problems with watching Max Verstappen dominate every weekend, just again, take the time, deep breath, come back with a new outlook on Formula One. Enjoy the midfield racing more, because then if at the one point where Max does not win, it'll make that more memorable or more special to you as a fan in that regard. So everyone, deep breath. We're going to come up with some fun content this summer break to keep you updated on NF1. I imagine summer silly season is about to show up with regards to the transfer market. So that'll be fun to talk about. But again, yes, everyone enjoy their August. Have some fun.
Yeah, and I would just want to add, just enjoy the August. Keep checking our social media channels, whether if it's YouTube, Apple Podcast, Instagram, Threads. I think I'm missing one there. Now I'm blanking. But I think maybe we'll do another fan meetup, whether if it's at Trinity Common or maybe a Blue Jays game. But yeah, just keep checking. We're gonna try to get some things out. But yeah, 538. Let's get to 600 followers by the end of the month. This is the F1 podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Richie, with my amazing co-host Andrew, and hope you have an enjoyable rest of the summer. And see you in a couple weeks.